The narrative I'm going to tell you isn't easy. It's not a typical narrative, and none of us would want to go through it. But it's about family, difficult relationships, and delicate boundaries. Things we take for granted might become vague and bewildering. This is the tale of myself and my daughter, Bella. Things gradually shifted in seemingly benign ways, and we found ourselves at a crossroads that neither of us wanted to be at. What got us here? And is there a route back? I invite you to listen and feel beside me. It was a pleasant day with the sun just setting behind the towering buildings, throwing a warm orange glow over our quiet neighborhood, and I was in the kitchen making supper, the soothing hum of the radio in the background. My daughter Bella had just returned from a weekend away at college. The home exuded a peaceful, comforting atmosphere, a calmness born of familiarity. Bella had grown up so rapidly, it seemed like only yesterday she was the young child. Bella followed me around the house and asked me numerous questions about life. She was now 21. She was no longer the little child I remembered, but a strong, confident, and even inadvertently distant young lady. The chemistry between us had shifted as she grew older, and I was still adjusting to it. Dinner was ready, so I summoned her from the living room. As we sat down at the table, I noticed something strange in the way she stared at me, intense enough to make me halt. At first, I disregarded it as my imagination. We discussed school, friends, and how much she missed home. Watching a movie, but the way she spoke, the way she looked, lingering on my arm longer than usual, made me feel something I couldn't quite put into. 2 words after dinner, we decided to watch a movie together. Something we used to do before she left for college. The living room felt cozier than usual. The dim lighting and soft cushions making for the perfect setting for a quiet night. I couldn't remember the last time we'd had such a peaceful evening together as the movie played. I found myself glancing at her more than I should have, noticing how she'd grown. She was no longer the child I had raised, but a woman. A woman. And then, just as I began to feel a strange unease about the thoughts running through my mind, she moved closer to me on the couch. At first I thought it was harmless, but then her hand brushed mine. A spark shot through me as if there was something between us that shouldn't have been there. Something electric, a feeling I knew I shouldn't have felt. I quickly pulled my hand back, startled by the intensity of the moment. "What's wrong, Dad?" she asked, her voice soft, almost most worried. I looked at her, my heart pounding, not knowing what to do or say. "Nothing, baby. I'm just tired." It was all I could say, trying to brush it off and hoping she wouldn't notice the tension between us. But I knew something had changed. Something had changed in that moment. There was something we couldn't ignore. The line between father and daughter had blurred, and though neither of us had crossed it, the air was thick with unspoken thoughts. We sat there in silence, the movie still playing in the background, but neither of us really paying attention anymore. I got up, told her I needed to go to bed early, but as I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us. As I lay in bed that night, my mind raced with thoughts. I knew I couldn't allow this emotion to grow. I needed to keep my distance for both of our sakes, but deep down, I wasn't sure. The next morning, I awoke restless, the events of the previous night repeating in my thoughts. I tried to tell myself it was all in my brain. I was her father, nothing more or less. I loved her sincerely, but not in a way that might be misinterpreted. I was being unreasonable, I reminded myself. When I arrived downstairs, Bella was seated at the kitchen table with a book. She welcomed me with a grin as if nothing had occurred. Perhaps it was nothing, simply a curious occurrence that only I noticed. "Good morning," I responded, attempting to grin and sound as natural as possible. "Good morning, Dad," she said, her voice calm and lovely. I was considering going for a stroll later. Do you want to join me?" It has been a long time since we did anything together. I hesitated for a second, uncertain if I should spend so much time alone with her after how I felt last night. But then I reminded myself that it was simply a stroll between father and daughter. Nothing wrong with that, of course. I responded, trying to seem friendly. "That seems good." That afternoon we drove to a park near our house where Bella and I had walked so many times when she was little. The air was fresh, the sky was blue, and for a moment everything felt normal. We walked side by side, talking about nothing in particular. Old memories, her future plans, and everyday gossip. I found myself smiling more and feeling more at ease around Bella. Perhaps I had overreacted the night before, or it was just passing sensitivity. But as we walked further into the park, there were times when our conversation came to a halt, leaving a silence that stretched on longer than it should have. The air seemed heavy with unspoken thoughts and feelings I didn't want to acknowledge. At one point, we reached a clearing with a beautiful view of the wide lawn ahead. Bella paused and turned to me. "You've always been there for me." She continued softly but seriously, "I don't know what I'd do without you." I attempted to grin. Words stopped me. The way she said it, the vulnerability in her voice moved me deeply and made my heart hurt. I attempted to grin to brighten the atmosphere. "Don't worry," I joked. "Dad isn't going away," but she didn't grin. Instead, she took a step closer, locking eyes with me. "No, you're more than just my father. You're everything to me." I froze as her words hung in the air, weighty and full of significance. I was not prepared to face it. I studied Bella's face for any indication that she was being nostalgic, that this was simply a normal moment between father and daughter. But there was something in her gaze that I couldn't ignore. "Bella," I whispered my voice. I choked up and muttered my words. "You know Daddy adores you, right? But not like that, not like this, I understand." She responded, her voice heavy with passion as she drew in closer. "But I can't stop thinking about Daddy. I try to push it out of my mind, but it keeps returning." My heart pounded and my body froze. This was not the way a father and daughter should communicate or look at one another. My thoughts screamed at me to back off, to stop this before it went out of control. But my body appeared frozen in place, unable to respond. "We should go back," I remarked, my voice trembling. "It is late." Before I could look away, Bella reached out and softly touched my hand. The touch was innocent, but the way her fingertips stroked my skin made my gut tighten. "This shouldn't have felt like it, Dad," she murmured, her voice filled with something I couldn't identify. "Bye. I know this isn't right, but I have no control over how I feel." Panic rose inside me. I drew my hand away and took a step back, my heart racing in my chest. "Bella, we cannot. This is incorrect. You're mine. This is not right, Dad, and we cannot do this." She stared at me. Her look was a combination of perplexity and hurt. "I am not confused, Dad. I understand how I feel." "No." I shook my head, feeling the ache rising within me. "This isn't correct. You are my daughter, and we can't—" I couldn't complete my speech because the words were too weighty and hazardous to pronounce aloud. Bella made another step towards me. Her gaze was focused on mine, and I knew I had to do something to halt this before it got too far. I needed to maintain some space for both of us. "We should go home," I remarked, attempting to maintain a calm voice. "This isn't correct, Bella. We shouldn't be like this." Bella paused, bending her head slightly and speaking with regret. "I am sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I didn't mean to embarrass you like this." I took a deep breath, trying to control the emotions that were flooding my heart. "It's okay, baby," I said softly, even though I knew it wasn't okay. We just needed to keep some distance. We drove home in silence, and the air between us was heavier than ever. I knew things would never be the same again. A boundary had been crossed, and though we hadn't crossed it, something had changed forever after we got home. Neither of us said Bella walked directly to her room, and I remained in the living room gazing around the empty home. Everything was the same, but the sadness in my heart made the place feel more foreign. Part of me wanted to hurry up to my room and talk to Bella to clear things up, but I knew it would only make matters worse. I sat on the sofa, my mind racing with ideas. Bella was my kid, and I never imagined that we'd end up like this. Memories of her youth came flooding back. Days when she raced around the house laughing and playing, and I was constantly looking over her, ready to protect her from harm. Now everything was different. Bella was an adult, no longer the innocent young child she once was. But I was her father, and my feelings for her should have stopped there. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed, looking at the ceiling, my thoughts racing with questions and anxieties. What made Bella feel this way? The next morning, I questioned whether it was because I was too near to her. I questioned whether I had done something wrong in raising our child. Our relationship, which should have been basic and innocent, had grown unbelievably complex. The following morning, I awoke weary. I thought that my intense feelings from the day before would subside, but they just became stronger. Bella had left the room without saying anything to me. The air between us was so thick that it was difficult to breathe while I sat at the dining table. Bella came downstairs well-dressed, apparently ready to depart. "I'll be back to school soon," she replied, her voice serene, but I could hear the fear inside. I nodded, not sure what to say. Maybe that is a good thing. I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need some room." She gazed at me, her eyes sorrowful, and said nothing else. Bella gathered her belongings and was ready to depart within a few minutes. I stood in the doorway watching her go to the car, my heart heavy. Everything between us had altered permanently. "Have a safe trip," I spoke, my voice choking in my throat. She turned back to face me. Her eyes were tearing. "Thank you, Dad," she muttered. Ben discreetly got in her car and drove away. I waited there and watched Bella's vehicle disappear down. The familiar drive was gone, and the home felt empty and strangely silent. The entire area appeared to have lost a piece of its spirit, and I couldn't help but feel as if I had lost something irretrievably. I knew that distance would allow us to settle down, ponder, and sift through our emotions, but I couldn't deny that things had gotten out of hand, and I wasn't sure if our relationship would ever be the same again. In the weeks that followed, I attempted to return to normalcy, but nothing was the same. The home was too quiet without Bella, and I couldn't stop thinking about her recollections of that time, her eyes spinning in my head. I wanted to think that the distance would help lessen the hurt and that the emotion would fade over time, but deep down I knew that once anything changed, it would never be the same again. Something between Bella and me was broken, and no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't get back to where we started. One weekend afternoon, I received a text from Bella. She wrote that she was trying to work through her mixed emotions, that she knew things weren't right, and that she needed time to think. I read each message with a mixture of sadness and relief. Bella needed time, and so did I. Maybe with enough time and distance, we'd find a way to mend our relationship. But I exhaled. I closed my phone and stared out the window. The metropolis in the distance remained tranquil, but not in my heart. Perhaps only time will answer the questions that neither Bella nor I can address right now. My narrative teaches us to respect the boundaries of our familial ties. As parents, we have a responsibility to unconditionally care for and love our children. But we must equally recognize that love must be accompanied with respect and appropriate distance. There can be times in life when we are confused, particularly as relationships evolve over time. But it is critical to remain sober and create clear boundaries. I would encourage everyone who is a parent or is developing a close connection to be clear about their duties. Don't allow emotions to cloud the boundaries between father and kid, mother and child, or other connections. If left untreated, little moments can lead to large cracks, which are incredibly difficult to heal. The lesson I learned is to always be wise, to understand what is right and wrong, and to know when to quit before things go out of hand. Respecting boundaries is the best way to safeguard the most essential relationships in life.